Rocks. Acting Primark Vond twitched an ear as he sipped his drink. EQ rocks, Ambassador Flynn repeated. You can't be serious, Vond said, staring at the alien fleet on the view screen as it drifted toward his forces. The Primarch's chamber was nearly empty. Vond had refused to flee. If his world was going to fall, he would fall with it standing, drink in hand. I'm very serious, Flynn replied. They throw rocks. Vond narrowed 3 of his eyes at the human fleet. Their ships looked primitive, barely capable of faster-than-light travel, using chemical propulsion instead of advanced drives. There were no signs of shielding, inertial dampeners, or artificial gravity. Why would you ask such a backward species for help? Vond demanded. We asked everyone, Flynn said. Humans were the only ones who agreed. Fools, Vond muttered. The Kilgan had already warned every species not to interfere. Helping the Fuelen meant sharing their fate destruction. The Kilgan had given the same warning when they conquered the Asteroid. Vond's predecessor had ignored the danger, and now they all paid the price. What could humans possibly hope to gain? Vond asked. They're new to the stars, Flynn explained. They only achieved FTL a decade ago. They're eager for technology exchanges. Of course they are, Vond scoffed. Their defense strategy is throwing rocks. As I said, they're new, Flynn insisted. And their home system lacks the rare elements we use. They only have basics. The Coon fleet arrived on the screen. Vond sighed. So that's why no one's conquered them yet. They have nothing worth taking. Still, Vond realized the truth. Humans were desperate. Without stronger allies and better technology, they would be easy prey for anyone. The Fuelen Primacy had once been the strongest power in the galaxy. Everything humans could have hoped for until Vond's predecessor enraged the Kilgan. That mistake had cost him his life, and Vond his peace. It's not all bad, Flynn said. The humans, Dirtlings as they call themselves, make remarkable use of what they do have. Dirtlings, Vond repeated with disgust. Yes, their homeworld is called Dirt. Vond almost choked on his drink. They named their planet Dirt, and they think they can challenge the most powerful military in history by throwing rocks. He fought the urge to shout, gripping his cup tightly instead. Why bring them at all? He asked finally. Because no one else would come, Flynn answered. Vond simmered in silence as the Kilgan Dreadship came into view. The massive vessel was 7 times larger than his homeworld, and carried millions of warships it barely needed. Even the full might of the Fuelen Armada would mean nothing against it, and Vond no longer had a full armada, only a fraction. Most of Vond's fleet was gone. The few ships he still commanded were either defending the homeworld or packed with refugees. He had accepted his fate. He might die, the Primacy might die, but his people had to survive. Then sensed his despair. I know how it sounds. The Dirtlings don't look like much, but they're very good at throwing rocks. Vond shot him a look, and then hurried on. They've been doing it their entire history. At first they used rocks against predators. Then they sharpened them for hunting. Later they tied them to sticks with plant fibers and sinews so they could throw them further. They fought each other with rocks. They even wore rocks to protect themselves from other rocks. Vond said nothing, sipping his drink. As their technology advanced, then continued. Waving 3 hands for emphasis, they made better rock steel ones, incendiary ones, even rocks that explode. When they reached space, they figured out how to throw rocks in a vacuum. Irritation finally broke through Vond's calm. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand, the ambassador said. The Dirtlings love their rocks, they're proud of them, and they're very, very good at throwing them. How nice, Vond muttered, glaring at the massive Dreadship on the view screen. But why do I only see a few hundred of them? Shouldn't there be more? That's just their expeditionary fleet, Flynn explained. Most of them are in the asteroid belt. Vond's ear twitched. What for? Their leader said something about expanding her rock collection, Flynn admitted, shrinking a little as he said it. Vond groaned. Of course she did. Moments later the Dreadship reached the Fuelen Armada. His ships fired everything they had, plasma, antimatter, the fury of what remained of their great power. It was useless. The Dreadship's immense gravity warped the battlefield itself. Plasma bent away before impact. Antimatter streams reversed course. Even his own fleet had to dodge to avoid being destroyed by their own weapons. The Armada pressed closer, trying desperately to break through. As soon as a few ships managed to strike the monster's shields, the Dreadship answered. Millions of weapons fired at once, tearing through what was left of the Fuelen fleet. Survivors retreated, having barely scratched its defenses. The Dirtling ships hadn't joined the charge. They held position. They were throwing rocks. They don't need to get closer, Ven said. Their projectiles are fast enough to push through the gravity field. Indeed, Vond took another sip, unimpressed. But they don't seem to be doing much. Stopping fast-moving objects is the first thing any shield is designed for. Even a normal warship wouldn't be bothered by stones, much less that. He turned away from the screen, walked to his desk, and lifted the glass cover from a small console. Beneath it was a single button. Pressing it would trigger a chain reaction that would force the sun to go nova. Vond doubted the blast would be fast enough to destroy the Dreadship, but if his people were doomed, he would make sure their enemies suffered too. Before he could press it, Ven's hand stopped him. Normally, such boldness would have earned punishment, but Ven was his oldest friend, And this was the end. Vond looked at him in silence. That was just the expeditionary force. Ven explained softly. The real attack begins now. He pointed to the screen. Vond leaned closer. Something was moving fast from the asteroid belts, so fast they had to be traveling at a fraction of light speed, maybe 10%. Vond squinted, trying to make out the shapes. They were rocks. Some were only a few kilometers across. Others were as big as moons. Hope flickered in Vond's chest for the first time in years. I told you. Flynn's voice crackled over the cum. The Dirtlings are good at throwing rocks. The Dreadship's reverse gravity could bend plasma and antimatter, but it could do little against an asteroid moving at near light speeds. The first rock slammed into its shields, shattering into fragments that scattered like shrapnel. More followed, hundreds, maybe thousands. For the first time, the Dreadship trembled under the assault. The massive sphere tried to maneuver, but something so large couldn't dodge easily. Worse, every time it shifted out of the way, the rock shifted too, correcting course to intercept. How are they doing that? Vond whispered. Engines, Ven answered. The Dirtlings strapped engines to the rocks. It was so simple Vond almost laughed. Primitive, yes, but brilliant. Then the Dreadship unleashed its fleet. Millions of warships poured out, and Vond's brief hope faltered. Even if the humans destroyed the Dreadship, the Kilgan fleet would finish them all. His broken Armada couldn't stand against such numbers, and the Dirtlings' fragile ships would be slaughtered. Then it happened. A rock the size of a moon tore through the Dreadship's shield and struck the sphere itself. The entire Colossus shuddered. A hole the size of a continent ripped open in its hull. Its shields flickered and died. The Kilgan fleet froze. Ships fell back into the wounded Dreadship, crushed by their own collapsing defenses. Vond realized the truth. The impact had knocked out their gravity control. The Dreadship's unnatural gravity failed. The sheer mass of the dense sphere crushed everything inside. Millions of Kilgan lives ended in an instant, reduced to pulp by their own creation. Warships nearby lost control, their crews reduced to smears against bulkheads. Only a handful of ships managed to escape, many of them smashed apart in the storm of incoming asteroids. Vond stepped back to his console. His voice was steady as he opened a channel to the remnants of his armada. This is the Primark. Jam all Kilgan transmissions. Engage the survivors. Leave none alive. He ended the transmission, his eyes still fixed on the sight of the Dirtlings' rocks tearing the most powerful weapon in the galaxy to pieces. No one had yet reported the Dreadship's destruction, and Vond intended to keep the method secret if possible. The remains of the Fuelan Armada advanced. Only a few hundred ships remained, but that was more than enough to finish off the handful of Kilgan warships still afloat. The Dirtlings had stopped hurling asteroids after the Dreadship's shields collapsed, but it took another 40 minutes for the last rock to finally strike. By then, the Kilgan fleet was gone, their forces annihilated. The Armada ended its jamming, opening the comms once more. What's the name of their leader? Vond asked. Admiral Wells, Ven replied. Vond hailed the human commander. Admiral Wells, this is Acting Primark Vond. My compliments. Together we have won a great victory. The screen flickered to reveal the Dirtling, a strange, symmetrical face. Only 2 eyes, pale skin, no fur except for a mane atop her head. Vond had seen many species in his time. Few were uglier, yet none had filled him with such relief or joy. He briefly wondered if she drank Cleef. Perhaps one day he would offer her a cup. Acting Primark Vond Wells replied. She could not bow in the Fuelan way, but offered something close enough. Her voice was high and melodic, but the translator carried her meaning clearly. Indeed, we have. May this be the start of a lasting friendship. I'm sure it will, Vond said, taking a sip of his drink. The ambassador tells me your people have a special relationship with rocks. The human's brow furrowed, confusion passing across her face until the translator clarified. Oh, she said, and then smiled, baring her teeth in what the translator assured Vond was a sign of pleasure. Yes, if throwing rocks doesn't solve your problem, you simply throw bigger rocks. Vond couldn't help but chuckle. That admiral is how legends are made.